Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Videntis podcast. It's January 2nd, 2025. As always, we like to jump right into the biggest stories. And today is no different. We are focusing on the House of Representatives today. Things are getting pretty heated over there already. So we're going to break down what's happening with the new Speaker, Mike Johnson, and these interesting new rules they've put in place.
Yeah, what's so fascinating about this is it's like these changes they made in the House, it really kind of reflects the broader political climate we are in right now. We are seeing a lot of tension, especially within the Republican Party itself.
Okay, so let's unpack all of this. Just a quick recap for our listeners. Kevin McCarthy was ousted back in October, and Mike Johnson stepped in as the new Speaker of the House. But it sounds like he's inherited a real mess, right?
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. The Republicans only have a razor-thin majority in the House right now. It's just 222 seats and the Democrats 212. And actually one seat is vacant. So any misstep at all from Johnson. And it could mean big trouble. And of course, you can't forget about this looming December 20th deadline. The one for funding the government. If they don't reach an agreement by then, we are looking at a potential government shutdown.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the pressure is definitely on for him. And to make things even more interesting, we've got the Freedom Caucus out there making some pretty serious demands.
Right.
Can you maybe explain to our listeners who they are? And what exactly are they trying to accomplish?
Sure. So the Freedom Caucus, it's this group of very conservative House Republicans. They're known for their really, really hardline stances on things. And they're essentially demanding concessions from Speaker Johnson in exchange for their votes, on key issues like the government funding bill. Their demands often revolve around, significant spending cuts and really strict adherence to these conservative principles.
Gotcha. So with all of that going on, how does this impact Speaker Johnson's ability to even do his job? I mean, is he going to be able to keep everyone happy while also getting things done, especially with all of these really crucial deadlines approaching?
Well, it's this really delicate balancing act for him. On the one hand, he needs to appease the Freedom Caucus, to secure their votes and avoid a potential rebellion that could lead to his own ouster. And, we all remember how McCarthy got kicked out. But on the other hand, he also needs to find a way to work with the Democrats on issues where compromise is absolutely necessary, like funding the government. And let's not forget, the Freedom Caucus's demands, they aren't always super popular with the more moderate Republicans or the public at large. So if he caters too much to their demands, he risks alienating a much larger portion of the population.
Wow. Talk about being caught between a rock and a hard place. And then on top of all of that, they just went and changed the rules for removing the Speaker. Now it takes 9 members to trigger a vote instead of just 1. I mean, it seems like they're really trying to avoid another McCarthy situation, right?
Exactly. The stated goal is to create stability and prevent further disruptions like what happened, especially given their slim majority right now. Making it harder to remove the Speaker, theoretically it gives him more room to maneuver and, make some tough decisions without constantly being worried about getting ousted.
Okay, I see that side of it. But doesn't this also raise some concerns about transparency and accountability? I mean, if it's harder to remove the Speaker, doesn't that also mean that they have less incentive to listen to dissenting voices, even within their own party, let alone, the opposition?
Yeah, that is a valid point. And a lot of critics have raised that very same concern. Some people argue that this rule change could stifle dissent within the Republican Party, and that it puts too much power in the hands of just the Speaker, because it creates this situation where even if a bunch of the party disagrees with what the Speaker's doing, they might not be able to do anything about it.
So it's basically a trade-off. They are trying to gain stability, but potentially at the cost of accountability. And, maybe even some of the democratic process in the House, this new rule change, it's definitely going to have a ripple effect on how things work in the House. It will be interesting to see how it all plays out, especially with such a divided government right now and a president known for pushing boundaries. But don't worry, we will keep you updated as things develop.
Yeah, speaking of President Trump and pushing boundaries, maybe we should talk a little bit more about his America First agenda and how that might impact the current House dynamics.
Yeah, so Trump's America First agenda, which was really popular with his base during the campaign, it emphasizes economic protectionism and stricter immigration policies. And, a more assertive foreign policy stance. So those are all areas where we're likely to see friction between the White House and the House, especially, with Democrats, who just oppose many of these ideas.
So are we basically looking at a potential for gridlock then? It's definitely possible, with a Republican majority in the House, but a Democrat-controlled Senate. Reaching consensus on legislation aligned with Trump's agenda, it's going to require a lot of negotiation and compromise. which hasn't exactly been a hallmark of recent politics, has it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Things have been really polarized lately. So what are some of the specific things that we might see emerge as this all plays out?
Well, take funding for the border wall, for example. It was a major part of Trump's campaign. And it's probably going to be a big point of contention in budget negotiations. Democrats have consistently opposed it. They see it as wasteful and ineffective. So reaching a compromise on that issue is going to be a major challenge for Speaker Johnson, especially given how much pressure he's under from the Freedom Caucus, who are going to insist on getting full funding for the wall.
That's a great example. And I imagine trade deals will also be a battleground, right?
Yeah.
Especially with that America First emphasis
Absolutely.
on protecting domestic industries.
Absolutely. Trump has been critical of the existing trade agreements. He says they disadvantage American workers, so he's likely to try to renegotiate those deals, which could cause conflicts with trading partners and even some members of his own party who support free trade policies. Navigating these really complex economic issues, it's going to be a big test of Speaker Johnson's leadership and his ability to balance everyone's interests, within the House and the White House.
It sounds like Speaker Johnson has a really tough job ahead of him. He's got to appease the Freedom Caucus and find common ground with the Democrats, and then navigate Trump's agenda, all while making sure the government is funded and working properly.
And we can't forget about the other players involved, too. The Congressional Progressive Caucus, which is a group of more left-leaning Democrats. They're going to be vocal opponents of Trump's agenda, and they're going to try to get their Democratic colleagues to resist any compromises that they don't like.
Right, so it's not just about keeping the Republicans in line. It's this constant back and forth between both parties, each trying to get their own way.
Exactly. It shows how the House of Representatives is like a tiny version of the whole political landscape. You've got these competing ideologies and everyone fighting for power and influence, and there's constant negotiation and compromise. And when they can't compromise, you get gridlock. It's fascinating to see how it works, even though it can be pretty frustrating sometimes.
And it's important to remember that this all has real consequences. The decisions made in the House affect everyone, like healthcare and education and the environment.
Absolutely. And it's easy to get caught up in the politics and forget about that.
That's why it's so important to stay informed and involved. Don't just ignore it all because it's frustrating or confusing.
I completely agree. By understanding what's going on, you know the motivations of the different people involved and the consequences of their choices. We can be more informed participants in the process.
So, with all that in mind, what does this mean for the average person? I'm just trying to understand what's happening in politics today. I think the main thing is this. We are in for a wild ride this year. We've got a divided government and a president who's known for being unpredictable. And the House of Representatives is already having a lot of internal conflict. So things are probably going to be pretty crazy in Washington.
Yeah, that's true. We're probably going to see gridlock and partisan battles, maybe even some big changes to the political landscape.
So what can we even do about it? I mean, it's easy to feel totally overwhelmed by all this.
The most important thing is to stay informed and pay attention. Don't just tune it all out because it's confusing or frustrating. Really pay attention to what's happening. Do your own research and come to your own conclusions.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to speak up. Contact your representatives. Get involved in local politics. Talk to people who have different opinions than you. All of that can make a difference.
Exactly. Democracy only works if people are active and informed. And remember, it's not about always agreeing with each other. It's about trying to understand different perspectives and having productive discussions and finding ways to work together to try and solve the problems our country is facing.
Like we said before, we are all in this together. We might have different opinions, but we all want a better future for ourselves and our kids.
And that's something worth fighting for, even when things feel chaotic and uncertain.
Absolutely. So going into this new year, let's all try to remember that. Let's stay informed, let's get involved, and let's keep having these conversations. Thanks for joining us on the Videntis podcast. We'll be back soon with more deep dives into the news.